Las cosas que necesito en la vida ya están aquí. Las cosas que necesito en la vida ya están aquí. I am free, free as a bird now, with my feathered wings. I am free, free as a bird now, with my feathered wings.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Camino Cafe. I am Lee Brennan and I am thrilled that you are here listening to us on YouTube or on our new podcast. And if you do happen to be a listener and you're enjoying what we're doing, if you know of someone that we should interview sometime, please drop me an email at leebrennan@gmail.com. I would love to hear from you. And today I'm so excited to have Roy Uprichard here with me today. And he is based outside of Belfast. And we have, I think, a really exciting talk coming up for you. Roy has been very busy during this past year during the lockdown and actually wrote a best-selling book. So we'll be talking about that. And he has done multiple Caminos. So we'll be talking about that and lots of fun stuff, the spiritual variant and so on. But before we go too far, Roy, would you say hi to everyone and just kind of give a shout out to where you are and what you're up to these days?
What I'm up to these days is a major house renovation, but more importantly, still doing lots of walking. Live in a little coastal town just east of Belfast, right on the coast, a little town called Bangor in County Down. So that's quite idyllic, and I just love being by the sea. And the more of sort of walk Caminos, I've realised that the sea was the thing that brought us together rather than drove us apart. There was some stat like, in the 14th, 15th century, it was quicker to get to Santiago from Dublin or Southern Ireland. It was quicker to get to Santiago by boat rather than overland from Leon. Yes. So there's big sort of naval and coastal connections there all the way up and down that Atlantic seaboard. So I've just been fascinated this last couple of years researching more on that, a little bit more on the archaeology and the connections of what some archaeologists call the Atlantic facade or the Atlantic coastal areas that run all the way from southern Portugal right the way up to the Orkneys. So there seems to be a lot of shared, not only technology, but spirituality and culture and Celtic culture through that. So the last couple of years, getting my head around that, as well as actually tramping the Caminos. My last Camino was in 2019, the Portuguese central route from Porto, and then the spiritual variant. So that was the last opportunity there. In the meantime, still reading, writing, walking, getting up early in the morning, trying to meditate, trying to exercise, trying to stay sane.
Yeah, aren't we all? So now you did your very first Camino, I think, from Saint Jean. You did the Camino Frances. How did you first hear about the Camino and what made you decide to pick that route? Because that was back in what,
2014, yeah 2000. Well, in a strange way, my first Camino started in Nepal in 2010. Went out to visit friends there in Kathmandu and ended up doing a part of the Annapurna circuit. Loved it so much. It was a sort of semi-successful attempt to limit middle-age spread, only semi-successful. And I realized the little training I'd done was not sufficient for walking at altitude in the Himalayas, but it was such a gorgeous thing. I just really remember the prayer flags, the sort of sense of spirituality there, even in the midst of, a lot of deprivation and a lot of underdevelopment compared to the West, and in quite a landlocked country. But it was actually one of the most beautiful landscapes I'd ever come across in my life. You know, going up towards the Annapurnas and just seeing their silhouette at night is something that's burned on the retina, the back of your eye. You can just see it all the time, you know. So that's a wonderful thing, whereby the immensity of that landscape, you know, really made our problems feel so small, or made our issues feel so small. And we were all in this together. There were Germans, French, Italians, Southern, Northern Irish, Scottish, some Welsh people crossing our paths there. So that was, in a way, my first introduction to pilgrimage, and of a sense. And then we thought, myself and a couple of friends thought, hey, wouldn't it be great to go back to do something more? Perhaps Everest Base Camp. Yeah, and that was a possibility. But then we looked at some of the videos of the flight from Kathmandu to Lukla, which is one of the most hairiest, scariest airstrips, littered with crashed planes in the world, and at such an altitude. I thought, maybe this isn't a great idea. Maybe people, you know, who are in advanced middle age, it's maybe not the smartest idea to go up to that. So we began scouting around for alternatives, and I just came across an interview in a magazine and a book about someone who'd just done the Camino, and it was the first time, what is that? And it just sounded a fascinating journey through time, through winding landscape. And a big advantage of the Camino as opposed to the Himalayas is the mountains are flatter there.
Yes.
I find that suits my needs more these days. So in a sense, coming across that article and starting to read and research some books, it just began to speak to me. So then we thought, right, the Camino is maybe a slightly more sensible and perhaps more navigable and perhaps safer route to go and do. So then the research started. But the person I really blame is Martin Sheen. He's responsible for so many blisters, and I'll never forgive him for that. But seeing The Way, after having done the research and seeing the film The Way, that was the killer. That sealed the deal. And just my daughter, family, friends just knew I had to do that then, you know. So that was so it's a mixture of Nepal and Martin Sheen got me on the Camino.
I love that. Yes, Martin Sheen definitely influenced me as well. So I'm wondering, prior to you going on the Camino, you were teaching.
Yeah.
Had you written any books before that?
I did a little book for friends out in Nepal to sort of fundraise for their charity. I did a little sort of short run book, but that was the first thing I'd really written properly or attempted to write. That started with, I took a little notebook out to Nepal, and I thought I'll just make some notes so I can get some information in the local paper. And I came back with one or two full notebooks because it was such a transformative experience, a culture shock and a transformative experience, and a place of great beauty and challenge as well. So that the writing began about 2010, 2011. And it's sort of, I suppose after the first Camino, the Camino Frances, it just gripped me so much. Again, I didn't intend to, but there was such an emotional reaction, and we met so many people, and so much seemed to happen compressed in a finite time. And the landscape is all fresh and new, and it carries you through the landscape. A lot of it just carries you through. The beauty of it carries you through. Of course, there's a difficult part in the middle where it's all about determination, less scenic. But often the landscape of Navarre and then going into Galicia just carried one through. And so, yeah, I started becoming fascinated more and more with the history of the Camino, working out, you know, why, trying to understand, trying to logically analyze why this appeals to me so much. Because, you know, I'm not from a Catholic background, I'm vaguely an Anglican background. It's never been part of my, in a sense, culture up until then, but it just felt so right. And then emotion kicks in, and you know it's got you. it's the heartstrings called, and then, but still that logical part of my brain. Maybe an introvert maybe has to always rationally try and work out why they're attracted to something. They may not verbalize everything, but we've got to work out why we're so attracted to this. So that's I still haven't worked that out. I'm never going to, in a sense, but I've somewhat more of an idea now that why it's such an attractive thing. And that would maybe go back to shared Celtic roots that were all across Europe, and finding out that more of my family were from Wales, and which is a Celtic heartland, strong land, from a Quaker background. So there's a lot of sort of stillness and sort of centering down, in a sense, quite mindful in a sense. A lot of that there, and then finding connections both from Wales and in Ireland, and then seeing a lot of those Celtic symbols scattered, especially throughout Galicia. And Galicia, as someone said, well, Roy, Gael Ethia, the clue's in the title. It's a Gaelic country, it's a Gaelic linkage, and then all sorts of mythology has overwritten that linkage to sort of try and explain the connections, and bring meaning to peoples. Undoubtedly, there was lots of communication channels back and forward all the way across those seaboards. So I suppose there's a sense of some sort of historical and cultural linkage there as well. That became that started to rise certainly in the Camino Frances, and then further on in the Camino Portuguese.
Yes. Well, I think it's no mistake when that seed is planted that we should take a Camino pilgrimage. The seed gets planted, whether, it's from Martin Sheen or wherever, but that's, to me, there's no mistake. And I think once we're there, there's just this energy that we feel, and it's almost something that we can't even put into words, but we keep trying. And I love sharing stories because I think it's so powerful what happens there for each of us, isn't it?
Yeah, it's I mean, again, thinking of it, wondering, at its power. And it's something, I suppose, my latest way to try and grapple that is that, you're walking in the footsteps of generations and millions and hundreds, did some of the maths, it's hundreds of millions of people who've walked these paths over the centuries, but certainly in the early Middle Ages. And, we're walking through a sort of hallowed pathway where people have brought their prayers, their intentions, their spirituality, their fun, along that. And the place has been made special by those who have walked it. Yes. The place might be special in its own right. James may be there or he may not be, but the place has been made special by those who have walked it. And in a sense, they say, using the Celtic sort of analogy, I look upon it as a sort of extendable thin space, as we would call it, with the barrier between this world and the world of spirituality, or the other world, as the Celtic people would say, has been rubbed porous by prayers and intentions of those who've walked that. And in a sense, they've shed something of themselves. They've left traces, they've left essences of themselves. And you suddenly find yourself moved in a certain place. And it's not in the big cathedrals usually, it's just somewhere out along the way, and something happens and you can't compute when it's going to happen, or you can't really understand the emotional power of it. But in a sense, it's like they have put the hard work in. And so for us now, I felt we reap the benefits and we get almost a free hit.
Yeah.
If you know what I mean, we get a free hit at connection, both with the place, with spirituality, with ourselves, with others, with the sense of the other. So, what you're doing and what I'm attempting to do through words here and there is to pass on that some little sense of that wonder, so that others might want to experience this themselves. And so we've got a free hit because of the hard work and endeavor people of the past have put in. So it's incumbent upon us who benefited from so much of this to do our own bit of work
Yes.
Community building for yourself, me scribbling in a room and trying to put words on a page and get it out there. So it's an attempt to pass on the baton in the sense, hey, look, this is important. Consider this. Yeah, consider this.
Oh, Roy, I think what you're saying, you know, I was speaking with Susan Jagannath, just recently did an interview with her, and we were talking about, as pilgrims, it's almost like we're paying it forward. You know, when you write a book, when I do an interview, we're paying forward, I think. And you're right, I love how you're connecting what others have done before us and have made this path what it is. And now we're paying it forward by hopefully sharing and inspiring others to go. So yeah, I love that.
Yeah. And some of it can be brought back home as well. There are many pilgrimage paths back home. And really what I've realized is, you know, I need to do more walking in Ireland. The Irish pilgrim paths, because they, you know, that's just as valid. So much has been put into the Camino de Santiago by so many over the years that, you know, it's still special. It always will be special. But there are, you know, there are other pathways as well where we can find meaning. You know, and that's been important now, you know, during this last 12, 18 months, where we find meaning. We can find some meaning where we are. Could I just read something that's maybe related? It's come to me just there now. It's really, that's from the first book, Restless Hearts. And you know, you go through this. The end point is spectacular, but it's not the end point. It's the journey there. It's what happens along the way. And so, you know, how do you bring that back home, or how do you feel at the end of the journey? You know, for me, this is after 2014. And, you know, we went for a little holiday to Finisterre after. Myself and wife went a little holiday for a few days to Finisterre afterwards. And then, you know, moved back to, got on the bus for Santiago. And this is the sort of final section of that. It may be time to leave, but the Camino never leaves you. And even though its end point may differ, of course it never ends, for now it's carried in the heart. And the tables turn, for just as the paths of the Camino once reminded one of home, from now on a cherished woodland walk will evoke a faraway track, to which one can return in moments of longing, or in walking it afresh in laced up boots, once more breathing in its beauty. The last sight of Galicia, for now, was beyond giant water droplets flowing from the wing of our plane as it made a watery ascent. And for the briefest moments, my mind threw up the image of the Camino as a long scroll, a palimpsest, from which writing could be erased enough to be overwritten, and stretched to wind back 500 miles and then beyond. It was frayed by the wind into 1,000 threads, and those were the myriad branch lines leading to the front doorstep of each and every walker. And there was space for them to write on it anew, to add their story. For the stories of the past could be written over, yet never fully erased. Invariably traces were left behind, ground deep into its fibers. The palimpsest image fades, lost in the dense green of the Galician forest, swallowed all too soon into mist and rain.
Roy, that is beautiful, and so captures, you know, that we carry this in our hearts.
Yeah, it's emotional. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, places, it's how, but that sort of magical transfer somehow, it's how places on a map become places in the heart.
Oh, I love it. Yes.
Yeah. And I'll just throw in this sort of St. Columba, one of his famous quotes, let your feet follow your heart so that you may find the place of your resurrection. So you let your feet follow your heart until you find the place of your resurrection. And part of that resurrection was service to others. So, you know, I see what you're doing as service to others. And as you say, paying it forward is a perfect analogy. But yeah. That's it stays there. It stays there. It's lodged, and you can never get it out. You know, but you can bring some of that essence back there, and in a sense, it helps one see your own landscape with fresh eyes as well. You know, there's beauty here. There's beauty here. There's beauty in all our home places to be explored and enjoyed, and maybe we pass them all too much in busyness. So, you know, we can bring that mindset home, but yeah, it lodges with one, and it's I see it as such a tremendous gift. You know, it's almost like a born again experience, quote unquote. You know, it's a fresh start, and you're walking away from your quote unquote problems. In a sense, you're walking away from yourself and your situation. You're having a holiday from yourself or your repetitive thoughts. And so it's like a break in transmission of the old you. And it inserts that notion of, hey, possibility.
Yes.
There's so much possibility here.
So much possibility. And I love how you said that it opens our eyes. And I think it opens our hearts to things that when we're in our, what we call regular life, we lose seeing the beauty that's all around us where each of us live. And I think the Camino serves kind of this break for us that gives us a chance to reopen our eyes, reopen our hearts, and like you say, be born again and to see things fresh with a beginner's mind. It feels so good. Well,
it really is a system reset. You press the reset button.
It's a reset. Yes.
Yeah. You were going to say.
Which we're all going to need again, I think, right after all of this stuff ends, of our lockdown. I wanted to, I know that we'll probably have a lot of listeners and viewers who are going to be very interested in the Gaelic connections, the Celtic connections. And, I wanted to say for myself, having so much interest in Ireland, that as I walked through Uprichard and, got into Galicia, I had no idea it was going to have such a Gaelic feeling. It should have made sense to me, as we talked earlier about the name, but I had no idea. And from that point on, the walk into Santiago, and then the time that I spent in Santiago, I feel the music, the energy. I feel like I'm, in a sense, at home in this Gaelic world. My daughter grew up as an Irish dancer, so Irish music was always filling our house. So I wondered if you could just educate everyone a little bit about, why is there this connection, and why is that something that we feel when we're there?
Yeah, maybe just a little introduction from the latest one, which is On Off the Portuguese Way. Yeah. Okay. Sometimes you long to journey and you don't know why. The Germans named this as far sickness, Fernweh, wanderlust. So you trace the map lines from Porto to Santiago de Compostela along the Camino Portuguese coastal, central and variante routes, relishing the names of unfamiliar places like La Bruja, Redondela or Armentera. In 2016, I fell in love with the Portuguese route and its spiritual variant. Its pastoral paths, less crowded, more meditative, gave me what I longed for. And when you fall in love with places, they keep drawing you back to say more. To walk the various ways is to join a community of the imagination, one defined not by culture, language, or skin tone, but by the stories we hear and tell each other of our shared humanity. And these ones occur in the Atlantic's edge, threading the line between land and sea, or within sight of Loch Ria or river, for it was water that brought us together rather than kept us apart. And with each walk or visit, more connections emerge, not only of a Celtic soul shared between Ireland and Galicia, but something more, people and places everywhere, becoming interconnected and braided together, deep-rooted in a shared Indo-European heritage and ancient westward migrations. With hindsight, it seems to me that the Camino might also be a demonstration of, or an active learning tutorial in Celtic Christian spirituality, reconnecting us to primal memories, to the earth, the cycle of the seasons, and our place in the cosmos. Its reverence for nature resonant again, chiming with urgent ecological concerns, a spirituality that still has much to say, its inclusive ethos, a liberation from toxic religion with its fear of punishment by a capricious God. So the mythic aspect of this is sort of traced back to a couple of thousand years BC, and an Irish book called the Liber de Gabla, the book of invasions, the taking of Ireland. But that was actually a book constructed on folklore put together by early Christian monastic communities in the 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th century. But it attempts to put the Irish people in the context, in a biblical context, in the terms of wandering, and it traces the Irish people, the Gaels, back to Galicia, and traces the Irish people as a wandering people who have emerged out of the east, in a sense almost like a lost tribe on an Abrahamic pilgrimage looking for a place of safety. So it puts people firmly in that context and traces some names back to one of the daughters of Noah. So it attempts to trace back that to say you have a continuity, you have a past, you're also people of purpose who belong. And so the notion was that the Gaels set out, there's a chapter on A Coruña, we can go into this in more detail if you want, but I don't want to get too techy on it. The tower in A Coruña was sort of known as the Tower of Hercules, and allegedly a son of a Milesian son called Eth climbed this tower, and it was at Halloween, and seen this wonderful green land far, far, far off in the distance, and he's decided, we must go there. I have to go there. It's such great beauty. And so they set up, the myth is that they set out there to travel to this land in the north, and it's directly north from Galicia, from A Coruña. And they get there, there's some mishaps, there's betrayal, there's a killing of Ith, the Milesian Gael, and the survivors come back, and they put together a party to go back and sort these people out. And so they do sail back, but it's within a very druidic context. And one of their chief advisors, a bard in a sense, as well as someone who was acquainted with the magic of the earth and traditions and spirituality. A bard called Amergin was the first one to sort of set foot on this ground and sort of claim it for themselves, not as an invasion and a warlike takeover, but in a sense an identification with the land. He calls out to the spirit of the land, the spirit of Erin, the goddess Erin, and it's an identification with the land. And then there's a tussle and a settlement. So it's based, the linkages are based with that, with the Gaels. It's the mythological book of the Gaels arriving in Ireland at 1000, 2000 BC, etc., etc. But that was based on so much contact, so there's a lot of linkage between Galicia and Ireland. There's a common heritage claimed, but not from the Galician side, it's from the Irish side, looking backward where we came from. And in a sense, our island peoples always look out to greater landmass. They look out to beyond. A lot of the early graves looked out to coastal areas. So island people look out for land, for a sense of belonging, where they came from. And I believe there were so many contacts, especially in the early Christian era, monastic era, north and south, between Iberia and Ireland, that in a sense, people read back on those contacts read back in time and said, look, there's a fit here. There seems to be a connection. There are folk tales. There's folk memories of people coming from that area, from that neck of the woods. And so what we know now, there was trade, and there was commerce, there was trade, there were sailors long before, there were star sailors long before people who navigated by the heavens, long before people had charts, and people used to be able to read the waves and judge connection when they were close to land. So there was lots of trade there, and undoubtedly I believe there are people from Iberia came here and settled. There wasn't an invasion, but probably a population transfer over time. Now, there also would be people who come from Brittany as well as Wales and Scotland. But there certainly seems to be a shared, what they would call a lingua franca, a shared Celtic language, and that survives in many parts of Western European coastal areas. The oldest place names seem to have a Celtic strata to them. And some of the oldest place names with a Celtic strata to them are on the coastal areas. So all the way down to Portugal. So therefore, what was seen then as the Celtic fringe, after the Romans came in and beat everyone up, and everyone was sort of put back into their boxes in a sense. Although the Romans didn't come to Ireland, so the languages that survived, be it Brittonic, be it Galician, be it Portuguese, be it Irish, seem to have a common root.
Yes.
So I think it's a linguistic and cultural identity rather than an ethnic one. I don't think there's such a thing as an ethnic Celtic peoples, but there was something that developed over time to aid trade and communication, a linguistic and cultural affinity. And with that came a sort of great reverence for nature and great sort of connection with the cycles of the seasons. So that's a little bit of how I think myth was constructed to give meaning. It's not an independent historical account, but it tells us something of the many connections that were there before and a shared Celtic culture.
Yeah. Oh, Roy, I love learning this. I think you mentioned earlier something about primal memories. And, I definitely felt a pull during that particular part, right? And I kept thinking to myself, is it the green? Is it is it because for me, it felt like it looked like Ireland at times. And I wondered, with you actually being from Ireland, did you have that same kind of feeling as you walked through that area?
Yeah, it's green Spain. I mean, it's known as green Spain, the greenest part of green Spain, so there were many connections there. Landscape, the damp was one, it was wet, it was moist, it's his own microclimate. So it was a familiarity, but it just shocked me, especially coming into, certainly the Bar, but even more so in Galicia the first time, just the lavish fertility of the place. Yes. Things were growing from every corner of a field. Everyone had the little plot. I mean, things were exploding out of the land and on the plates. The vegetables were exploding in the dishes. So yeah, there was there's definitely a big connection with Ireland. I thought, is this the Celtic sparrows, etc., the Celtic emblems? I thought, was this just a bit of wanna make believe, wanna make identification? And as I looked at it more and thought about it more, read about it more, no, there was a definite connection, and those would have been along the sea routes.
Yes.
People who constructed the massive Neolithic sites, both in Ireland and in Galicia, were expert sailors, and that's how they transferred their culture. So you find a similarity of cyst graves, you have a similarity of stone alignments all the way up and down that coastline, and extending all the way up to Orkney as well, and the Shetlands. So yeah, that there's something deeply resonant in that. But it's not an exclusive thing, you know. It's because sort of Celtic Christianity sort of took that base, that fervent love for nature, a very inclusive and non-judgmental type of Christianity, and not a legalistic and very religious one, deeply rooted in the cycles of the seasons, and in a sense, you know, spread that out much more widely beyond ethnic groups, so that it part of this sort of I suppose Chesterton said something like Christianity didn't abolish, quote unquote, what he would term paganism, it fulfilled it. So in a sense, all that nature spirituality was endorsed and said, you know, and then C.S. Lewis came along, you know, talking about myth. Well, you know, myth is fact, the one true myth. It was a myth, a fantastical story, but it was also happened to be true. The incarnation was also true. So, you know, paganism, as it was known, was in a sense fulfilled by well, the Christian monks thought that, and they absorbed that. Now, in other cultures, the church went against the past and sought to exorcise it as evil, as wrong, as reprehensible. Whereas the beauty of, and this is the inclusive nature of it, the beauty of that early Celtic Christian experience is it took those webs, those fibers, and sort of wove it into a belief system. And so the, you know, the eternal knots and weaves of Celtic symbology, well, that's like the eternal love of God, and something inclusive that is for everyone. So it was a much more gentle, it was a much more gentle spirituality than what we've experienced in the last X hundred years, or at the height of sort of legalism. So something very, very gentle. And I do think, you know, people with that sort of background, we have it in our DNA and our genes somewhere, but also, you know, it's something open for all peoples, something open for all people. And we look, here's the thing, we all came from a shared Indo-European heritage. After the ice, there was nobody in Ireland 10,000 years BC. It was all ice, you know, and people moved out from the Indian subcontinent and from Anatolia, from Turkey, and just started the westward trek. So in a sense, perhaps where we know we have special Celtic connections, yeah, there's a real connection there. But even beyond that, all our Celtic languages are based on Proto-Indo-European, PIA. So in a sense, it goes far, far beyond, you know, a sort of white, westernized sensibility.
Yes.
It goes far back to the Indian subcontinent and people moving west and all those shared cultural exchanges. And so I trace identities back to Celtic thing, but to the Celtic age, but also way beyond that, because ages of religion and spirituality and belief systems were sort of like layers and layers grew up over time, and in a sense it was refined more and more. So it became less antagonistic, it became less a worship of the sun and more of gratitude for what was offered by nature, and a life force rather than the sun being something to be worshipped in a sense. So a life force. Celtic sort of spirituality has something called Newt, which is like a divine dance, an energy going through every molecule of the universe. So in a sense, their little symbol is not unlike the symbol of an atom. There's a divine dance through that. And so these people really were in touch with something primal and profound. And a lot of that is in respect and reverence for the earth. And now, in a sense, you know, the tables have turned, and we must respect the earth. It is our home. We're not over nature. I suppose Celtic theologians say we're not over nature to try and subdue it. We are part of nature. We are part of creation, and nature is the second book of God. you know. If you want to read something about God, you read and you get to know his creation first, his or her creation first. It's the second book of God. Now, before that, Celtic people, maybe I would think some Druids. I have some imaginary debates with Druids now and then in my head, and I think a Druid would come and tell me, actually, you got that wrong, mate. It's the first book of God. Nature is the first book of God. Your Bible is maybe the second one, but nature is the first book of God. And really it's an unwritten book. It's not defined by words. It's something that's immanent, that is, that we're completely dependent upon, and we are part of nature. We're not lords of it. And so therefore we must relearn respect.
Yes. Oh my goodness, Roy. I think I could listen to you talk about that stuff all day. Thank you. That was really very educational and very inspiring. We're almost out of time. And I want to make sure that we talk about the spiritual variant. It was not something that I was familiar with at all until I was on a recent call. And I was so excited when I heard about your books and that you had actually written a book about it. And so I just wondered, for the sake of time, maybe if you could just maybe tell folks, what are the top 3 things in your mind about why people should maybe walk the spiritual variant, and maybe start with why it's called the spiritual variant, what it is, but then the top 3 reasons you would recommend somebody walk it.
Well, spiritual variant, looks, it's a confected route. Okay, there isn't a lot of historicity to the route, but it's so beautiful. I suppose spiritual variant, in as much as it passes through a couple of monasteries. One is Armentera. There's a connection with a sort of there's a connection with a 17th century Galician monk called Padre Sarmiento, who toured that whole area and is actually responsible for capturing a lot of Gallego, Galician language and writing it down and recording that. So it's a beautiful route past Pontevedra. There's a little coastal thing, goes through the monastery of Poyo, and then up in the mountains of Mount Castrove, a place called Armentera, and then down the other side, and a beautiful river walk. It's almost like a little mini river pilgrimage, and comes to onto Villanova de Arousa. And instead of having to trek the 28 kilometers to Padron, there's a boat ride, and you're on this boat, and it goes up a Via Crucis, the only maritime Via Crucis where they've lined, I think, 26 crosses along the little islands up the Ria Arousa estuary. And it's one of the most beautiful, especially if you go first thing in the morning when the sun's coming up, it's one of the most beautiful little boat rides in the world. And
how
also,
long of a boat ride?
Sorry?
How long of a boat ride is it?
Just under an hour.
Okay.
It's a launch in a sense up there, but I mean, it counts as valid Camino walking. Yeah, that's sort of priced in to your stamp, so that is, you're recommended to do that. I wouldn't walk the road. It's not recommended. I've tried it and gave up after about. I tried it as an experiment, and it's just not safe. You're much better going on the boat. And also that whole route is dripping with Celtic connections as well. It's like Galicia. It's like other aspects of Galicia, and in a sense magnified there. And I found the same origin myth of the monastery of Armentera that was existent here in Ireland 500 years before for a local monastery 10 miles away from me, from the 5th century, called Mendrum. The same origin myth. In Mendrum, I walk in, a guy is looking to build a monastery. He hears this bird song. He's chopping down wattles to build a church. He hears this mystical, magical bird song, a bird that was prophetic, that talked as well as sang, and told him his efforts would be blessed. And he's away for what he thinks is a few minutes, but in a sense, then he ripped Van Winkles, and he's out of time for 300 years. And that's the perfect Celtic 3, the number 3 multiplied by 100. It's the perfect Celtic passage of time. So he comes back and finds the monastery built. He said, "What's going on?" And who are you? I am Mohi. And the guy there says, "But Mohi disappeared 300 years ago." And so it's a sort of meditation of, I believe it's a metaphor for connecting with the beauty of nature, and in a sense being lost from temporal time and going into eternal time, in a sense, which monastic communities would know about, all about contemplation. And the exact same myth, this is again why I think the connections are very real, the exact same myth is used and rebranded, cut and pasted, with only the names and places changed in the 11th century in Armentera on the spiritual variant. The guy disappears for 300 years and a monastery, he comes back 300 years later and the monastery's built. They say, who are you? I'm your abbot Arrow. He disappeared 300 years ago. So that's all. So there's myth there, there's myth, and you think, oh, it's a nonsense story. But I believe it was a metaphor for the monastic life in a sense. And here, there's a direct linkage between Mahi and St. Patrick. He was the first person baptized by St. Patrick, who's on to be a bishop. And their Arrow, this beautiful mountaintop monastery. You come out of the forest, and it's like a wave of green. It's a valley of green. You could be in the Tibetan heartland somewhere with the monastery there, and it's one of the most beautiful places in the world. I've been back 5 or 6 times there just to walk and visit around there. So there are. I found very strong and deep Celtic connections that I hadn't come across in any book, but I'd stumbled across by accident myself and then began to research. So yeah, if you have a chance to do that, it's a 3-day walk. You'll never regret it.
I can see just in your face and the tone of your voice just how special that variant is. So I cannot wait to go and do it. I wanted to give you a chance to let everyone that's listening to us today or watching us, could you just tell everyone the 3 books that you've written? And that way, I will include the links to your books so people can find them easily. But if you just want to share the titles, that would be great.
Yeah, Restless Hearts would be the first one. That's about the Camino Frances. The second one, Stone and Water. I've been out of the house for a month for building work and I just can't find it. Stone and Water is about the spiritual variant. And because it's the stone and water route is the heart of that. And then the most recent one is On and Off the Portuguese Way. That's subtitle of that is Celtic Connections, Galicia, Ireland, and Everywhere. So that's the most recent one that's done quite well. And that is maybe salami sliced from about three years of walking and just threading the stories together as it became clearer in my mind that the connections were real and very meaningful.
I know for sure I'm going to be reading that. My dad and I are hoping to walk that route next year. And so I know it's going to be on my reading list. And I'm really certain that everyone that has watched the interview or listened to this interview today, since we cannot have the pleasure of sitting in your class and learning from you, at the very least, we have your books and we can learn from you through your books. So thank you so much for talking to us today. It has been such a wonderful conversation. And I just love how you are paying it forward in what you've been a pilgrim, you've walked numerous times, and I think you're really paying it forward by sharing your gift of story, your gift of what you know about history and myth and so on and so on. And I think it's really adding to the Camino community. So thank you for doing that for all of us.
You're very welcome. There's also a selfish aspect in as much as it brings it alive. If I spend the time and write it and carefully research it and read it, it keeps it more alive in me. So there's a selfish aspect as well. It keeps it alive in me. And even if I would say, looking at a couple of sections today in preparation for this, it just brings back all the emotion. So I hope if people were to come across any of these books, it would both encourage them to walk and might give them grounds for reminiscence afterwards. It might provoke reminiscence.
Oh, I think.
Anyway,
yeah.
Really appreciate this. It's been wonderful talking to you.
Oh, Roy, it really has been. Thank you so much. And I just want to thank everyone that has listened to the interview today or has watched us. And just a reminder, you can check out all of our interviews on our YouTube channel, The Camino Cafe, as well as on our podcast. And if you have an idea of of somebody I should be interviewing, please let me know. Or if you have written a book or you want to talk about your pilgrimage, reach out to me. We'd love to hear from you. So thank you so much, Roy. Thank you for everyone that's a part of this big community of the Camino. And we hope that if you have not walked yet and you heard this interview, I know without a doubt you will be inspired to go on the Camino, whether it be on the San Frances or the Portuguese route. And I know Roy and I hope to see you there someday. Thank you, everyone. And Roy, I'm going to stop our recording, but if you'll stay on, that'd be great.
Take care. Thank you.